Okay, I'm here with RotterdaM. How's it going?
It's going very well. We're at Home Story Cup 6 and I love Home Story Cup. I've been part of every single Home Story Cup, so this is one of the reasons why I came down as well, and it's always a good time.
Okay, so the first place I want to talk about actually is your playing career. And even though I've heard it talked about like a million times in every interview, the first thing I wanted to ask was this, like, people have asked you like about specific tournaments or like, oh, you were friends with Grobby, and like we've heard these things a million times. But when you think about all the StarCraft 2 tournaments you've seen now, all the players you've seen play in different levels, like this sort of tournament or like IEM or like MLG or whatever, GSL, like the different levels of tournament, to give someone context, pick a StarCraft 2 player who's as good now, like relative to everyone else, as RotterdaM was in Warcraft 3.
Wow, I have to think about that for 10 seconds. If I think of myself as a Warcraft 3 player, I really think of myself that I was capable of beating pretty much anyone on my best day. But I was never that player that was going to win a major event. Like, I didn't go to the major events thinking that I was going to win them. So, who could I compare myself to? I'm slightly leaning towards a player like Cass, perhaps, even though like Cass is pretty damn good. But if Cass is going to go to a tournament, most people don't think he's going to win a major. And I think Cass on his peak is even better than I was in my Warcraft 3 days peak. But I also think that Cass on a good day is capable of beating anyone. And I think I was a ladder player as well. But I mean, maybe to some degree you could compare me with someone like Bling, you know, who's like a damn good player. But then again, I also think that like people will never think that Bling is going to be able to be like the absolute best. And I think in the peak of my Warcraft 3 days, I was capable of beating anyone. At least if the matchup was right for me, so that's really hard, man. I've never thought about that. If I would have to compare myself with a Pro Toss player right now in Europe, it would probably be maybe Baby Knight or Bling, like something like that.
Okay, what's the reasoning for Baby Knight?
Yeah, as I said, Baby Knight, I also think that he's like an up and coming player, and I was the same for a long time, but I won Eurocup, which was not a major Warcraft 3 tournament, but still was pretty competitive, as Sasa was there and Grobby was there, and I beat Grobby twice in that tournament. So I think that Baby Knight right now has the skill for that, but I also think that Baby Knight perhaps has the skill to go further than that and perhaps win a really big tournament, something I never did in my Warcraft 3 days, but still win a tournament of relevance. So yeah, I don't know, maybe Baby Knight level.
Okay. How old are you now?
I'm 25.
Okay, so that's something I want to ask as well, right? Basically, from what I remember in Warcraft 3, you came along kind of towards the end in comparison to the big names that we all think of who were there for like 6-7 years, etc. Do you feel as though if the casting thing hadn't have come up in StarCraft 2, you would have actually like gone hardcore into it? Like, I know you were playing the beta a lot. Would you have actually gone like all out trying to become some top player? What do you think?
Actually, like I really never planned to become a StarCraft 2 caster, not at all. Despite casting a lot in the later days of Warcraft 3, that was more because even though I was still quite good at the game, like even in 2009 or 10, I played a tournament in Korea and I got top 4 ISF. Even though it wasn't a very high profile tournament, I still beat some really good players to get top 4. But it was more something that like happened by coincidence, and then when StarCraft 2 came along, I really didn't have the plan at all to become a caster, because in Warcraft 3 it wasn't like something cool to become a caster. Nobody wanted to become a caster. The only reason why I casted Warcraft 3 tournaments was because the only players who did it, or the only people who used to cast Warcraft 3 tournaments, they really didn't know that much about the game. So then one day I went up to Dennis. It's funny that we're here right now at Home Story Cup, but Dennis was going to host WC12 finals. And I said like, hey Dan, you should let me cast because you don't know anything about this game anymore, as a joke, because I love Dennis. And he said like, if you want to cast, Kev, we can make this happen. Then I casted a Warcraft 3 tournament, people loved it because finally someone who actually knew about the game was casting the games. So from that moment on, ESL kind of figured out like, hey, the combination of one play-by-play caster and one analytical caster works really well together. So that's kind of how it started. When StarCraft 2 came, I didn't have any previous StarCraft experience, like I was not a Brood War player at all, so it was more like, I don't want to cast this game, like I want to get good at it, I want to play it. But then Home Story Cup 1 came along. Once more, it's funny that we're here at Home Story Cup, and that was the very first tournament I ever casted, and I didn't want to cast Home Story Cup at all, but Dennis really pushed me. He's like, come on Kev, just come, it's gonna be fun, like the Muslim is gonna be here, you know, well, Hazubs, obviously we're all good friends from Warcraft 3, they're gonna be here, so you have to come. And I was like, I don't know anything about this game, even though like by then I was high master, but I still felt like there's so much for me to learn about this game. I don't know anything about non-Pro Toss. I have no Brood War experience. He said, just come man, don't worry about it. It's going to be a fun, casual tournament. I said, okay. I casted the tournament and people actually really liked what I had to say. And then I heard that it was like a free position at ESL. They were searching for a full-time employee. So I sent an email and I said like, okay, because in that moment I really didn't know where to take my life. I didn't know what I want to do, if I want to go back to school and study or if I want to work. So I decided to send an email, and actually I got hired. Also mostly because Dennis once more. This is why one of the reasons why I always come to Home Studio Cup, because I love Dennis. I owe him so much. And yeah, he told ESL as well, like, "Ah, hire Kevin, he's gonna do fine." And that's exactly what happened in the long run. So yeah, that's how it all started. I mean, it was a coincidence. I rolled into it. I got the job at ESL, and after that, I just continued as being a caster. I don't know if I would have ever. Yeah, I actually think that if I wouldn't have become a caster, I would have at least tried to go full pro. But there's really no telling in how good or how bad I would have been. I can imagine, considering the fact I was quite decent at Warcraft 3, that on a certain moment in the game I would have been quite good. But I don't think I would have been like tournament level good. I have no idea. It's impossible to tell. I mean, I think I reached a respectable level despite being so busy with my casting career and working always 40 hours a week. On a certain moment, I was still beating like the best players in Europe and sometimes even best players in the world. Like I beat a couple of really good players, which I think is impressive for the amount of time that I only had available to practice. Then again, winning a ladder game or winning a best of one doesn't mean anything. Winning a major tournament, much more is required. So it's impossible to say how good I would have been.
Okay, for this next topic that I have in mind, we'll leave like the names of casters out of it, just so we can talk honestly without people getting upset. Mm-hmm. But this is a topic I wanted to broach because I've never seen it said in public. Okay. But a lot of the fans or people who read Reddit or Team Liquid, they think to themselves, because they like a caster, maybe they like his personality or it's cool the way he casts along with the game, they think that like everyone, even players, respects this caster's analytical knowledge. Whereas when I've talked to a lot of players off record rather, a lot of them will usually say like there's only 3 casters in the whole world I actually think know, inverted commas, know about StarCraft 2, mm-hmm. and usually 1 or 2 of them are sort of their friends as well, so that even then you're wondering like how honest is he being with that. So what I want to ask is, since you're like doing the analytical side of things, mm-hmm. just talking only about the analytical casters, and again we don't have to mention any names, like realistically compared to even like mid-tier pros, how much knowledge do these guys actually have, do you think?
Not much. If I have to be honest, like I practice a lot, I think, as a caster, and I really put a lot of time and effort into understanding the game as well. But I'm very well aware of the fact that they make decisions that, even though I see them and I can try to make sense out of them, that doesn't mean I understand the full reasoning out of it. And that's one of the most challenging parts, I think, of my profession, to some degree at least, that I will never fully be able to understand why everyone makes a certain decision, even though sometimes it's going to be like super obvious, straight to the point. Sometimes pro gamers play bad as well, like there's no shame in it. Like I will do a shitty cast every now and then, and some players, they will play a shitty game, that happens. But I do not understand the game on the same level as they understand it, even though I watch so much StarCraft and I play a lot and I play on a respectable level that I can almost like compete even. That still doesn't mean that I have the same knowledge about the game that these players have. And as much as the fans out there would love to think that caster A or caster B knows as much about the game as the players, no, that's absolute rubbish. Most Grandmaster League players know more about the game than any caster.
So, I mean, along those lines then, the reason why I ask as well is because you get these weird combos now where a bit like the fans like someone because of their personality, and so it sometimes doesn't matter if the guy knows that much. A lot of the people who are, I guess you would call them like the executives at the big organizations and leagues, when they hire people, they can sometimes go with similar decisions. Like they don't necessarily think, oh, how much does this guy know? And so some tournaments, you're seeing these weird combos where it's 2 guys who are called play-by-play guys. They both just essentially sort of say what you're seeing happening on the screen, and there's not really any depth to it. Like, does it surprise you that this still happens? Like, should this be gotten rid of?
It's hard to say it should be getting rid of, because even though like some casters, they might not know all that much about the game and they might have no credibility or they might not seem that legit in any RTS competitive environment, they're still like passionate about their job, and they're just trying to entertain people and they're just trying to do what they love. So it's really hard to be that hard on them. But yes, I mean, I don't consider myself as a great player, but sometimes I listen to casters as well and I'm just like kind of shaking my head. I was like, oh God, like they seriously have no clue what they're talking about. And I'm sure that there are players out there who might listen to me and say like, okay, RotterdaM, you're completely wrong about everything you said in the last 3 minutes. That happens. But yeah, I think some combinations, they do not make a lot of sense. They might be good for the very, very casual StarCraft 2 fan, but anyone who plays the game competitively or watches a lot of streams, I do think that you need always at least one caster who knows or who knows how it is to play RTS on a competitive level. So yeah, I sometimes wonder about the combinations we see as well.
I mean, the interesting thing about casting in general in esports is that for so long, like Korea was way ahead of everyone else, because the guys who were like doing the OSL and stuff like that was their whole career. So you got the sense that even when they weren't at work, they were actually like studying maps. Or, I mean, I've seen some casts where if you looked at it with the subtitles on, you could like learn things about the game that you didn't even know, even if you played the game, you know. And so it sounds like these guys were like the same way the players are in the game. They were like about the game, but like from their job perspective, you know. Whereas in the West, I can understand why people haven't been like that, because sometimes like casting was like a gig one weekend and then you don't know if you're going to do it for 3 more months. But now that we hear behind the scenes these crazy figures thrown out for some of the top guys, do you think that enough people behind the scenes who are casters are doing like their homework and stuff? Like, do you think people are starting to learn that that's what they have to do if they want to like go beyond just the casual level?
Like, there are two answers to this question. First of all, I don't really know how true it is about these Korean casters. Yes, I've heard about it as well, and yes, I've watched the VODs with the subtitles, and it sounds cool, and they're crazy passionate about the game. But that really doesn't mean that those guys are great players at all. Yes, they might do their homework and they might know a lot about the game from the theoretical side, but there's still the different element of actually being able to play the game on a competitive level. I mean, the Western casters might actually be a lot better at the game than the Korean guys are, but the Korean guys might do the homework better. So, as I said, I've watched those videos and I thought it was cool as well, but I still don't know how much that's true, that they are so much more professional than we are. Second part, I actually think there are quite some casters out there who really do their homework, and more and more like casters. Some casters really like to bring it out there as well, like, oh, I made so many notes for this tournament and stuff. Yeah. And some people just do it behind the scenes, and some people just put in their effort. I really think that there is a reason why some casters are that popular, and there's a reason why some casters get so much credit. That is because they put in those hours, and that is because they do their homework. And they don't have to say it. The people listening to the cast, they will realize that these guys actually put in the required amount of hours to do that job to a certain level. And I think it's fine. I think most Western casters work very hard. Yes, some people make a ridiculous amount of money, but there are also different categories that you can make a lot of money in. Like, you cannot compare your regular StarCraft 2 caster with a guy who's massive on YouTube. That's sort of two different. You know what I mean. It's like it's a whole different ballgame basically. It's not the same thing. And some people, like, this is something that I want to say for a long time. Some people might always be hard on Tasteless because they say like, oh, Tasteless doesn't really play the game anymore. Tasteless doesn't put in the same amount of hours. This new guy on the block, he works so hard. But what people forget, I think, is that Tasteless, like 7-8 years ago, gave up everything that he had to move to Korea, to purchase this pro gaming career that he had, or like make a living out of casting Brood War. Probably barely made a living. Like, Tasteless has been around for so damn long, and he's been working so hard for a certain amount of time. So I really don't give a shit if some new guy who comes up right now maybe puts in more homework than Tasteless. I wonder if he would have done the same thing 6-7 years ago, the moment that Tasteless made that decision. So the experience that Tasteless brings to a broadcast means more to me than a guy who just came up and who did his homework. And that's why, and Tasteless obviously has a great sense of humor and stuff and works so well together with Artosis. And I feel that maybe even if Tasteless doesn't do his homework, he has Artosis next to him, and Artosis is like a freaking guru, he knows everything. So I feel that's completely fine.
Okay, another area of casting where it seems like there's a gap between what maybe the ideal would be and what we have right now is that if you go to all these tournaments, it used to be the case that you had 2 casters and they just did the whole tournament. But now, because you have games going on all the time, you obviously have combos. So you have like these 2 do this stream, sometimes parallel, sometimes like as shifts so that someone gets like a few hours off if you're going to do continuous streaming. Mm-hmm. So it makes me wonder, whenever I talk to players, there are certain players where if I'll ask them about another player, an opponent, they will say something like, and I say like, is he this good? They'll be like, oh, I can only talk about like TVP if they're a Protoss and he's a Terran. They'll say like, I can only talk about like his versus Protoss. So they're kind of implying that even though they're like top level players, they don't really know the other matches that well. So is it not a problem for some of these casters that they cast every single type of player from every region, every matchup, and maybe? Do you think it's viable that we could have like matchup specific casting?
Actually, I think you're making a really good point. Like, it's no secret that I'm a Protoss player, so I think I know more about Protoss than the other 2 races. This doesn't mean that I don't know anything about ZVZ or ZVT, because obviously, for instance, I lived together with the Muslim for a long time, so I always spoke about him with the matchup and tried to get as much information out of him so I can get it to myself and use it in casting as well. But there are certain moments, like for instance, I think Tasteless is the best duo in the business. Like, there's absolutely no doubt about it for me. If I can tune into any tournament, I want Tasteless to cast it. but them casting the European WCS Continental Finals made little sense to me. That's not because I don't think they're great, because I think they're the best, there's no doubt about it, but how much do they really know about these European players they see maybe once or twice a year? They don't. Lots of them were like former Warcraft 3 players as well. So for instance, I was a little bit surprised to see Testosis cast the European WCS Continental Finals, because I feel like they don't know them that well, they don't see them that well, so it surprised me. Then again, they still did a great job because it's Testosis and they're amazing. But yeah, I like the point that you're making, because I definitely think that certain casters are better or more suited for certain tournaments. So I think we're going to see more of that in the future, and not just tournament-wise, but also matchup-wise. Like a Homestead Cup, for instance, is super casual. Dennis always wants me to open the show. He wants me to cast the first series, because in the start of the day, the players don't really want to cast. Like, they want to cast once the day goes by and they see a player they like, they're like, okay, I'll cast this. But for the first 2 or 3 series, it's like no one out there wants to cast, so then I'll be casting. But later on as well, like if I have the choice, I'd rather say like, hey, I want to cast Blink because he's a good friend of mine, I know his playstyle very well, or let me cast Grubby because obviously I watch a lot of Grubby games and stuff, so you know what I mean.
Can you actually pick out one player off the top of your head maybe where you think you're like the most in tune with their style? Like when you're watching it, you know, like, oh, I think he's going to do something soon, or like, I think I know how he'll react to this, like better than others, is the one who comes to mind?
Who's that, Homestead Cup or just in general? Would probably still be the Muslim, because I lived together with him for 8 months and I watched him play so many ladder games, so I'm pretty familiar with the Muslim style, even though obviously the game changed quite a bit since then, but back then I would definitely say the Muslim without a doubt. Right now, the Protoss player I watch the most would probably be Sasa, so I think I'm quite familiar with how Sasa plays, and also a guy like Blink, just because like I would watch his stream, not because I want to be entertained or learn, just because I think he's an awesome guy and I love watching him play as well. So I would say this tournament Blink, but in general I'll probably still say the Muslim, and that's funny because he's a Terran player, but that works for me.
Okay, so as like a backup to this question, okay. Nowadays, when we have our casting duos and we have the play-by-play guy, we have the color guy, it seems like, oh, this is just the formula you have to follow, you know, because it works in sports and they do it for every sport almost. But I heard an interesting theory which goes that it actually doesn't make sense to have that combo in the modern world, because the reason it was invented apparently is because people didn't used to be able to get television feed of games, so they used to listen to baseball on the radio, so you needed a guy who was telling you what your eyes would have seen. He's saying like, oh, he hits the ball, it was a really great shot, whereas when you can see that with your eyes, you're like, well, I mean, I can see that, man, like, tell me why he did it, or, you know. So there's a sense to which that's kind of almost like just a thing that stayed over from even the past, and yeah, it's really successful, but you could maybe improve on it. And so I realize there's people who have the argument that, oh, maybe really casual people do need like a lot of help, like to know what the units are and stuff. But then again, I wonder, because let me just put it this way, okay? If you're starting the game and you are a casual and you don't know anything, that probably can't last that long if you play the game at all or you even watch it for a while. So actually, even you're going to get a bit sick of that guy doing the very simple kind of casting after maybe like a year, 6 months. So if you want to get like people really interested, like you don't want to alienate the hardcore people or the people who are getting more and more and more interested, the majority of your fan base almost is going to be the people who aren't that interested in the very, very low level casting. And so do you think it will ever be the case that you can like eliminate play-by-play, or maybe make it so that like the analytical guys do a little bit of play-by-play and then they mix it in with the really analytical stuff? Because to me, I think it'd be more interesting to have like 2 analytical guys who mesh really well, and then they're kind of feeding off each other, you know.
I think we can always play around with different sets of casters, and 2 analytical guys, I definitely think they are capable of running the show, but no, I really don't think we should eliminate the play-by-play caster, because I think they make the game so exciting for not just people who are new to the game, but to people who are new to esports. Like, if someone, let's say, has never watched any esports before and he watches StarCraft and he listens to me, he might like me, he might not like me, because he might find me boring and like, yeah, who's this weird guy with those 2 piercings talking about every single thing that's happening in the game? Like, this doesn't excite me. If he listens to Dodo Biscuit, he's probably going to be blown away. It's like, well, I'm watching something really exciting, and even though I don't really know what I'm watching, this is really exciting. So I really think we're going to always need casters like Dodo Biscuit, because they're just so good at what they do, and I really don't mind play-by-play casters at all, as I said, as long as you have someone next to them who actually knows a lot about either the players or their playstyle or their game. I really think play-by-play casters are something that we should cherish and not something that we should get rid of. Okay,
so addressing the fans, basically. There's quite a famous idea amongst fans now, even repeated themselves, even if they don't believe it. They say that, oh, if the last 12 in a tournament is all Korean, then, you know, I turn off. Like if Idra or Hawk or someone like Stephano don't make it through, then, you know, I have no one to cheer for, I'm not that interested. And these same people will tell you they love StarCraft, they love esports. So what I want to know is, do you really believe, like, how true do you think that is? And then also, is that kind of worrying that like a lot of people who are new to esports are like, well, unless there's someone who isn't Asian, then I'm not going to cheer anymore. I'm not interested, because we'd want people surely to be like so into the game that they, you know, if someone's awesome, it doesn't matter what his personality is like and that sort of thing. What do you think?
The problem lays within the tournaments as well. Like a lot of tournaments are just all about putting on a great show, having lots of fancy lights, having a big stage, but they don't really expose the true personality of those players. Because those Korean players, they have personality and they're damn fun to hang out with, and they have a sense of humor as well. But if they never get like the stage to actually show how they really are, or like to just show themselves to the audience, like the audience at home can't really identify themselves with those guys, and they will never feel the same way about those guys as they feel with maybe a raging Idra or a charismatic Robbie, you know what I mean? So I really think that that problem lays within the tournaments, and I really think this is why Home Story Cup is such a fantastic tournament, because we see the players from a different side, and this is the type of tournament where people are going to cheer as much for perhaps a player like Marine King Prime or MMA as they would have done for their favorite Terrans, whether it be the Muslim and whether it would be Thorin, you know? So I think the more tournaments that focus on actually really exposing the personality of players, that's going to be less of a problem. But I do agree that right now it is a problem. Like, not to give myself a shoulder pat or anything, but I think NASL did a pretty good job at exposing the true personality of the Koreans who were at our finals. We showed lots of behind the scenes footage and off camera content, and it was fun, you know. People got to see them kind of in a different light, and we gave them basically the stage to just do whatever they want, be themselves and have a good time. And I think that's the most important thing. We have to see the Koreans on a different way, and then just sitting in that box playing their game and perhaps winning emotionless or not. Because some guys, I mean, yes, if they beat a foreigner, maybe for them it's not a big deal. While if a foreigner beats a Korean, you often see them fist pumping and they'll be happy, and people find that cool to watch. But it's all about how we expose them, and do we give them the stage to present themselves properly. And I think if we do that, it doesn't really matter if it's going to be Koreans or not in the final. People just need to be able to identify themselves with the players they see. And if they never see anything besides a player, besides his actual gameplay, yeah, they're going to be less excited than a player they see give interviews, stream, and whatnot.
That actually ties into something I wanted to talk about then, which is along those lines. People have this perception that, oh, the Korean players, it's like they almost want to make up for the fact that the foreigners aren't as good as them by saying, okay, well, the Koreans might be better than them, but, you know, they have no souls. They're just the guys who robots practicing on machines. It's like a way of like evening it out a bit, like, oh, this guy's more passionate and that's why he's not as hard working and stuff. But I've actually seen from talking to Koreans, I talked to Puma, I talked to Holt. These guys say that actually, if you play on the Korean ladder and you understand Korean, they're just as BM as like Idra or anyone is, but they're saying it in Korean, you know, and they're not doing it at a tournament. And so, also when I talk to Violet, I talk to Select, these are guys who were Koreans and they've come to the West, and now they like totally westernized in that sense. They've got this, like, they play up to the crowd and stuff. They understand all this, and they say it's the same thing. Like, if you took anyone and just introduced them to this culture, they would get it, you know. So do you think it's a case that, like, this is kind of how we could fix the problem that people are bringing up with these tournaments, which is, it's not that we have to somehow magically get these foreigners who aren't as good better, which might be impossible. We just have to get the Koreans and like develop their personality. Like, is this the future? Do people behind the scenes who you work with like understand this?
I wouldn't say that's the future, even though I do agree that, as I just said, I think that's a very important point. We have to get their personality more out there, because they are fun guys, they have a sense of humor as well, and then it really doesn't matter whether you're from Korea or if you're from the US, because they are just as cool. The biggest problem, that's like one point. The other point is that I don't necessarily think we have to give up the hope of like the foreigners. I still believe in them, and I still believe if some people really like put in the effort, they're going to be at least out there to compete with them. And we're going to see a foreigner win a major every now and then. Like, I will never give up that hope, and I still think that's going to happen forever in StarCraft 2. So yes, I think it's important that we expose the personality of the Korean players more so people can identify themselves with them, but I don't think that's the future and that we're only going to see Koreans from now on, even though of course the Koreans, they are damn serious about this game and perhaps more professional than most Westerners. We got a couple of really professional and very serious gamers out there as well, we as in foreigners, so I don't think that necessarily has to be the future.
Okay, so speaking of foreigners now, I want you to give me your sense of how you weigh up the different championships around the world, because everyone wants to tell you that this tournament here is like a world championship, or this is like a major here. And I know it's almost gone completely mad on Liquipedia with that Premier Tournaments thing, where like they're trying to claim that like one guy has more wins than like MVP, because like 5 of MVPs or like in GSL or whatever, which doesn't really work out. But how do you see like the big tournaments around the world? Like for example, is Stephano winning something like an ASL 3 was it? Is him winning an ASL 3 as big as someone like NaNiwa coming top 8 in GSL? Because to a lot of people, they can't figure out like one's supposed to be really hard, so maybe top 8. You know, how do you figure out the accomplishments like that? How do you weigh it up personally?
Well, there are just lots of really tough tournaments around. I definitely do think that Stephano winning NASL Season 3 is at least as big as NaNiwa making top 8 at GSL Code S. Even though that was a super impressive performance by NaNiwa, and that's something that's very hard to accomplish. I mean, Stephano beat quite some Koreans as well to make his way to that NASL Championship. So I think there are a couple of tournaments out there. If winning GSL Code S is the World Championship, well, maybe to some degree, but it's also a unique tournament, it's a unique format. Like, as hard as GSL Code S is, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily harder than winning like an MLG Fall Championship, you know, where there are, or like an IPL 4 that we just recently saw. Like, that's super hard as well. Might be a little bit more random, but it doesn't mean that it's easier or harder. I really don't think that. Like, I really hate it as well when people try to class players as this is a Code S player, this is a Code A player, this is a Code B player. I really think that's complete rubbish, because there are guys who will be a Code S on a certain day or Code B on a certain day as well. That's like the biggest rubbish I've ever heard. You cannot class those players on a certain level. Making top 8 at GSL Code S is a fantastic achievement, and you can definitely compare it to winning perhaps some foreign tournaments, but it doesn't mean that it's a bigger achievement at all. At the end of the day, it's just still a tournament.
Do you watch GSL much?
Yes, I have to admit, when I used to live in Germany, I didn't watch it all that much. Ever since I've been in the US, I've been following it more and more. Certainly in the season NaNiwa did so well. I watched pretty much all the games. I thought it was awesome, and even this season I've been watching pretty much everything. Kooi as well. Frodan, big shout out to Frodan as well. He watches a lot of GSL, so often we meet together at Ben's house and we just watch GSL together.
Okay, so actually going on to the topic where you were mentioning there about the difference between the GSL and the foreign tournaments, I mean, the easiest way to break it down is that a foreign tournament takes like 2 to 3 days. You don't know who you're going to play in 2 rounds from now, because it could be someone else getting knocked out, etc. So it's kind of more about like your skill in the moment, or your rhythm, or what kind of feeling you're in, and you can kind of peak up to that 1 week and just be good for a few days and win the tournament in theory, which is a different type of skill set than like GSL, where it's more about like strategize for this particular opponent and like what will he think that I'm thinking, and like it's like a whole different mind game aspect. So what I want to do is give me like 2 or 3 foreigners who've never been in GSL Code S, or they've only been in 1 season or something, who you think would actually be suited to that style of like plan for this opponent, have certain things, you have a week to do it, and then also after that, give me like 2 to 3 Koreans who haven't been to many foreign tournaments, who you think could actually be quite good at like the 2 or 3 days, just be pretty good. Basically the opposite styles. Like give me a couple, because we all know who's good in each one on their own, you know.
That's one hell of a question. Even though I do agree with you that it's like sort of a different skill set that is required for that sort of tournament, I still think if you put Stephano in GSL, he's going to be damn fine just because he's a fantastic player. The other player that pops in my mind, even though he had a very bad weekend at IPL and even at BWC wasn't an amazing nerd show, I still think that nerd show is like head and shoulders almost above the rest of the foreigners, together with Stephano and together with a handful of other people. One bad IPL tournament does not make me lose my faith in nerd show. I still think he's a fantastic player. So nerd show and Stephano are without a doubt the first 2 that I think of, and then who else would be really good? I actually think Thorin in general is a player, even though Thorin tried his luck in Korea, I still think that he's a player who's damn good if you give him the time to prepare. He's a very skilled Terran. And I would even love to see the Muslim, man. Like, even though the Muslim is my buddy, so everything I say about him is a little bit biased. But I have a lot of faith in him, and if his mindset is always in the right place, I feel that he has an insane amount of potential in RTS, and I would really love to see him just be in Korea, and he's also better when there's no pressure on him. If you send a Muslim to Korea, everyone is thinking he's going to lose. And that is the moment that he's going to excel and that he's going to be at his best. And if you give him a week to prepare, like, I really don't think there will be that many players out there who will outplay him just because they are straight up better than him. If he has the right mindset, I would love to see the Muslim in that format. Koreans who I would love to see in foreign tournaments, I really don't think that mentioning 3 names is going to mean a whole lot. Obviously, I could name 3 players, but there are so many Koreans out there you can send to a foreign tournament and they're going to have an amazing run. So I don't think me mentioning 3 names would mean anything.
Okay, actually, I have a question about Stephano now. So if we try to look at Stephano as a player and figure out, okay, what does he have that the other foreigners don't have? To some degree, obviously there's people close to him. Just because he's like far and away the most successful foreigner and he can actually like legit win events no matter who's there. The main thing I came down to when I tried to study it was more like attitude. It's not even necessarily skill set. There might be people with as good, like every element you could pick one guy out. But like he actually seems to be the one true guy who actually you could believe him when he says like, oh, but I don't really care who I play now. Like everyone else says that, you know, but you look at their face when they're in a booth, they're like they're shitting themselves if it's like a really top player, you know. He actually seems like, I mean, that GSL World Championship is a great example. Like he didn't look like he gave a fuck after he won all those games. So what I want to ask is like, can you pick like a couple of other foreigners who you think like are similar in that sense? And do you think this is like maybe what sets him apart?
If there's one guy in my mind right now that I think is so damn similar to Stephano, it's going to be Munchie. Munchie has been really making a good name for himself over the last 3-4 months, and he totally has the same attitude as Stephano. And the moment that Munchie starts really caring about the games, I can see that he's getting nervous and he's starting to play worse. Like Munchie is on his best when he really does not give a fuck about whatever is going to happen. When he goes out the night before, he has to play the next day, and he shows up the next day and he's going to play some damn good StarCraft. So I really think that Munchie is a guy who's very similar with his attitude to Stephano, and I really think that's a big strength. Like the moment that those guys suddenly bringing on pressure on their shoulders that they never had before because they used to play so carefree, the game suddenly changes and everything is going to become a lot harder. But if they just like have that no care attitude, yeah, perhaps, I mean, somewhere probably deep down inside they do care, but as long as they don't feel that pressure on having to care, they're going to play way better than they did before. So I really think that Munchie is damn similar to Stephano, and I hope we're going to see a lot from him.
Okay, so we referred to NaNiwa's GSL round a bit. That was a while ago now. Like that was almost the first third or so of the year, I think, was when those two runs. Yeah, so that was quite a while back now. Since then, he hasn't had very many good results. In fact, when he goes west now, it seems to be terrible. I mean, he can lose in the first round. He can lose to people you never expect him to on paper. So what I want to ask is, you seem like someone who's always been like in tune with NaNiwa. Like even when everyone else was like writing him off or saying like he's good, but like he has problems here. Like you always seemed like a guy who was like, you understood his mind to some degree. So what I want to ask is like, why do you have like faith in NaNiwa? What is it about him as a player? Because I mean, a lot of people now, just to give a context, would say like, okay, well his best strength was PvT. Well in the West he almost never plays Terrans. His worst was PvZ. He plays Zergs all the time, and then in PvP he loses tons of those as well. So like, what reasons do you have to still have faith in NaNiwa as like a top foreigner?
His dedication to the game and the passion that he has to be the absolute best in whatever he does. Like NaNiwa is a person who can really block pretty much everything out in his life that's going on. Like he will care about nothing else than be the best in the game. And I have always admired his passion for the game. And he has never played the game for money. He's always played for the fact that he just, perhaps just to compete. He wants to be the best in what he does and he wants to win. Like you don't make NaNiwa any more happy than if he wins a $1,000 tournament or if he wins a $10 tournament in a best of one brag match. Like NaNiwa just wants to win whatever he plays, and that's why I love his dedication, and I still have faith in NaNiwa. Yes, he had a couple of rough tournaments, but there's a reason why he's been so damn successful in the last year or 2 years of StarCraft. Maybe 2012 hasn't been as good as 2011 was for him, but in 2013 I'm damn sure we're going to hear a lot from NaNiwa again. And just the sort of, it's weird, like he has this drive, like this drive to compete and this will to be the best. It's like almost like Ash Ketchum in Pokemon, you know, he wants to be the very best. That's NaNiwa, and NaNiwa's going to do good again.
Okay, now one of the final topics I wanted to ask you about was, like this will sound really broad, so I don't want to go like a million miles into it, but I just want to get your take on it. So when StarCraft 2 was first out, for the first year and a half, people had this way of justifying all the Terrans who were being successful, and it was kind of a crap reasoning, because it went like this. Everyone in Korea plays Terran, all the best players just happen to play Terran. The Terrans work very, very hard, you know, and that's why they're all being so successful. Now, we could maybe believe that could have been true at the time if things continued like that, but now there's no Terrans outside of Korea almost that have any success whatsoever. Like it's hard to even get someone in the top 8 of a tournament. On top of that, now everyone's saying the Zergs are the best, and now I hear the same things being said for the Zergs. Oh no, the Zergs are just practicing very hard, and you know, there's a lot of the best players just happen to be Zerg. Like, how can this really be when you look at the timeline of the patches? And this is bullshit, right? Isn't it?
Yeah, obviously it is. Right now, like no, the Zergs don't work harder than the Terrans and the Protoss players. There are plenty of Terrans and Protoss players out there who work damn hard too. But I also don't want to say that the only reason why the Zergs are winning right now is because the game is imbalanced, because that's really like you're taking away so much credit from those guys who do work very hard. But I do think that if we just look at statistics straight up, we can see that Zerg has been performing really, really well over the last 3, 4, 5 months, and that's not a coincidence. But Blizzard is addressing this as well. We saw a couple of changes to the investors, so yeah, I guess. And to some degree, you can just see the trend. Okay, right now perhaps this was the best race, and that was the best race. But we should never only look at like tournament results. Like, okay, this is the best race right now, because that can just be a coincidence as well. You know, there might be 3 or 4 Zerg players out there who are just going to win 3 majors on a row. That doesn't mean that Zerg is super imbalanced. It could just be because that weekend this guy had his momentum going. That's why he played better than he ever did before. But that doesn't mean that he only won because he's Zerg. That might have just been his weekend. At the end of the day, we only have 3 races, so it's not a super big coincidence if one of the races wins 2 or 3 or 4 majors on a row. Like, if it's a chance 1 out of 3, yes, that could happen. And we shouldn't only look into race.
I mean, the reason I ask you is because it's obvious in Warcraft 3. I mean, there's a lot of other factors as to why this was. But in Warcraft 3, you can literally chart, like, okay, in this period, like, this race had a better matchup versus these ones. Like, I'm thinking of when, like, Night Elf was beating Orc all the time, and then later on Orc was just raping Undead every time. And so the reason I wonder is because I think we can sort of fix it as fans if we just bear in mind, okay, there might be some imbalance, but like the best players are still like able to compete regardless of what the imbalance is or what the maps are or anything, you know. So maybe we should sometimes judge in this era, like a Terran player does super, super well, give him extra credit maybe, and sometimes, you know, vice versa. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I mean, yes, I think it's amazing right now if a foreign Terran will be the Korean Zerg, because it's not something that we see very often. So yes, you should give him a lot of credit, but I have a lot of faith in Blizzard, and they are really looking closely at all tournament results. And yes, it's obvious that Terran hasn't been performing that well over the last few months. They're looking into that, they're addressing it, and just look at the Heart of the Swarm changes, man. Like, the game is going to be completely changed. So everything I say right now about Wings of Liberty balance is completely irrelevant in 1 or 2 months when we're all going to play Heart of the Swarm, and the game is going to be completely different. So I don't think we should focus too much on race. We should much rather focus on the players and everything they achieve.
Okay, the last topic I want to broach with you is basically when we talk about like foreign players and Korean players, even by dividing it up like that, it means that fans are always going to have that in mind. Like, can the foreigners catch the Koreans? It's always going to be that dynamic setup instead of just talking about like this player who happens to be Korean is really good. Oh, there's a player over here in France who's really good as well, you know. The reason I wonder is, I want to get your take on this, okay? So everyone thinks that to catch up, foreigners just have to do whatever Koreans are doing. So if they have a team house, we get a team house. They have a coach, all right, I need a coach. They practice all day, I'll practice all day. But the thing I wonder is, I want to get your take on this is, would a foreigner ever actually be capable of being as dedicated as a Korean in this sense, right? As far as I can tell, those Kesper players are actually willing to give their everything up in their life. Like, they'll give up not having a girlfriend, they won't take like vacations. Like, I've heard that players like Flash, even when they were on top, even after they won a big tournament, they'd be like in the practice house the next day practicing. Whereas anyone in the West, our dream, if we want to be the best player, is to be the best player, have the money, have a girlfriend, have time off when you want to have it off. So I wonder, like, will the foreigners ever go the extra step and give it up like that? Do you have to, do you think? Like, what do you think of this topic?
No, I really don't think you have to. Like, but I come from a Warcraft 3 background where the best players in the world were never players who used to live in a team house. They were never players who went full time. Some people might say like that's because Warcraft 3 wasn't as professional. I really think that's rubbish. If you see the amount of money that Warcraft 3 players were able to win in certain years, like there was this one year where Moon won $180,000. Like MC right now won $350,000, but that's over the course of 2.5 years. So the amount of prize money that Moon won as well is insane. The amount of money that Grubby and even Todd won from time to time was crazy. And that was really not because the rest of the world was sleeping and didn't want that money. No, everyone tried to get that money, but they still got it in their own way. I don't think that you have to live in a team house to be the absolute best. Like, some people might call me crazy right now and they might say that I don't know about the Brood War pass and stuff. Brood War was a very different game than StarCraft 2, and Brood War had an insane skill ceiling, even though I didn't know the game and I've never played it myself on a serious level or even played it at all. Like, I mean, I played a couple of games in Korea back then, but that's it. But the way that I know the game, I know the way that the game worked mechanic wise, I can imagine that it's I mean, the amount of skill required to play that game competitively is absolutely insane. StarCraft 2 will always be a different game. yes, living in team house is pretty damn awesome, and obviously that's a way to get a lot of success because you're going to be very dedicated to the game. All your time is going to go into that. But do you really have to live in a team house? No, I really don't think so. I think there are your own ways to reach the top, and StarCraft 2 is a different game. Look at Stephano. Look how damn successful he has been. Has he ever been in a team house? No. He's never been there. NaNiwa has lived in a team house in Korea for quite a while, but even before that he was already damn good. I think there are so many examples of guys being super successful and not living in a team house. As I said, I think living in a team house is great and you're going to get a perfect practice environment, and yes, you have everything there for you to become the best, but does that mean that you're necessarily going to become the best? No, it's not. Like, there are still so many other elements that come to the game, and I don't think that they always have to take that other step in giving up everything. I mean, I think what made Stephano over the last 2 years is the fact that he had this no care attitude. If Stephano would have been that damn serious, if you would have put Stephano in a team house and you would have forced him to practice that amount of hours a day, there's no telling if he would have been as successful as he's actually been, because he won so extremely much. And some people might say he never won the GSL Code S, he never won the big MLG championships. I don't think really Stephano cares that much, because there are plenty of tournaments that he did win, and if he would have won all the same tournaments, if you would have put him in practice, I don't know. So no, I don't think that you have to go there. Is it good? Yeah, it's probably good, but is it a key to success or a requirement? I don't think so.
Okay, do you have a final message for anyone watching this? Someone you want to say hello to, the usual?
No, not really. I'm having a good time with Host Story Cup, so I hope you guys enjoyed this interview. Shout out to my mom. I love my mom, and that's it.
Dankjewel.
Alsjeblieft.